Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're really diving into the intricate world of environmental systems. We'll explore how everything around us, from, the tiniest particle to vast ecosystems, is deeply connected. And we'll look at how our actions, human actions, send ripples through these vital systems, often with pretty surprising results.
Absolutely. And this deep dive is really built around the core material you've been looking at. We'll start with the basics, the rules of matter and energy, mostly drawing from Chapter 2.
Okay.
Then we'll see how these principles play out in the real world with some case studies and explore that critical idea of feedback loops, pulling in insights from the lecture recordings you're familiar with.
Right.
And we'll even dip back into Chapter 1 for a couple key ideas we haven't covered yet, but are, well, pretty crucial for the whole picture.
Sounds great. We're going to uncover some really fascinating stories. The dramatic tale of Mauna Lake is one, and also the physics behind why the ocean keeps coastal areas cooler, which is such a contrast to inland heat. Okay, let's unpack this. So our sources kick off with matter itself. It seems basic, but understanding the difference between mass and weight, for instance, is actually quite important environmentally, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's not just semantics. Matter is, well, anything that takes up space and has mass, but your mass, the amount of stuff, stays the same everywhere. Your weight is gravity's pull on that mass.
Right, so weight changes if you go to the moon.
Exactly.
Right.
And environmentally, we focus on the mass of pollutants because that mass persists, it cycles through systems, it doesn't just vanish based on gravity, it never truly goes away. And all this matter, of course, is atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons. Chapter 2 lays this foundation pretty clearly.
Okay, so atoms are the building blocks. How do they create all the different elements? And what about isotopes? You hear about carbon dating. How does that work?
Right, so the number of protons defines an element, its atomic number. Mass number is protons plus neutrons. Isotopes are just atoms of the same element with different numbers of neutrons. Some are unstable, radioactive, like carbon-14.
Oh, okay.
And because they decay at a predictable rate, we can use them to date things, like ancient organic materials. It's like a natural clock, incredibly useful in environmental science for tracing matter through time.
So from atoms, how do we get to more complex things, especially something as fundamental as water?
That's all about chemical bonds, covalent, ionic, hydrogen bonds. Water, H2O, is a perfect example. Because of how it shares electrons, it's polar.
Meaning it has charged ends, sort of?
Exactly. And that polarity leads to hydrogen bonds between water molecules. This gives water amazing properties like surface tension, capillary action, but the really big one environmentally. Ice floats.
Right, because it's less dense as a solid.
Precisely. Which is unusual. If ice sank, lakes and oceans would freeze from the bottom up. Aquatic life as we know it probably wouldn't exist. It's a huge deal.
It really is. And that ties into the cooling effect near coasts, right? I remember hiking inland last summer, just baking on the asphalt, miles from the sea. The difference is stark.
It absolutely is. That's water's high heat capacity at work, something highlighted in the lectures with the Morrow Rock example. The ocean absorbs enormous amounts of heat energy just to break those hydrogen bonds and raise its temperature slightly.
So it acts like a giant heat sink.
A massive heat sink, yes. And then evaporation carries that heat away. Inland areas without that huge body of water just heat up much faster and radiate it back. It's a major climate moderator.
Which connects back to the idea that matter doesn't disappear. When water evaporates, the water mass is still there, just in a different form, carrying energy.
Exactly. That's the law of conservation of matter. Matter isn't created or destroyed, it just changes form. Our intuition often fails us here. People used to think dumping waste in a river made it disappear.
Or burning wood meant the log was gone.
Right. But the log becomes ash, CO2, water vapor, different forms, same atoms. Car exhaust actually weighs more than the gasoline because oxygen atoms from the air combine with it. Nothing vanishes. Every pollutant, every piece of plastic persists in some form.
That's a really sobering thought, actually. Everything sticks around. So if matter is conserved, what drives all these changes? What makes things happen? That must be energy.
Precisely. Energy is the capacity to do work or transfer heat. And it comes in two main flavors. Potential energy, which is stored energy like the chemical energy in gasoline, or you standing at the top of a ski slope.
Ready to go.
Ready to go. And kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion, the car driving, you skiing down the hill.
And like matter, energy follows rules too, the laws of thermodynamics. The first law sounds similar to matter conservation.
It is, very similar. The first law of thermodynamics is the conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another.
Like the gasoline in the car.
Perfect example. The chemical potential energy in gasoline is converted into kinetic energy moving the car, but also into heat energy from friction and the engine, and sound energy. The total amount of energy stays the same, just changes form. This underpins everything in environmental science.
Okay, so energy is conserved, just transformed. But why does everything seem to run down? Why do hot things cool off? Why does my desk get messy? If energy isn't lost, where does that tendency come from?
Now you've hit the second law of thermodynamics. And this is where things get really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive. The second law states that whenever energy is transformed, some of it degrades into a less useful form, typically dispersed heat, and the overall disorder or entropy of the universe increases.
Disorder increases entropy.
Yes. Think about it. It's easy to break a glass, but impossible for the pieces to spontaneously reassemble. A mountain erodes into sand. Sand doesn't spontaneously form a mountain. Energy spontaneously flows from hot to cold, not the other way around. Systems naturally tend towards randomness and disorder. As the lecture vividly put it, you can't put cologne back in the bottle after you spray it.
So basically, everything tends towards a mess.
In a nutshell, yes. Maintaining order, whether it's a clean room, a complex organism, or a stable ecosystem, requires a constant input of energy to counteract this natural tendency towards entropy.
So any effort to clean up pollution or restore habitats is essentially fighting against this fundamental law.
It is. It requires work, it requires energy input, we can create pockets of order like a restored wetland, but doing so always increases the overall entropy of the universe, usually through waste heat generated in the process. It highlights how precious and fragile ordered systems are.
These laws are powerful. Let's see them in action. You mentioned a case study, Mono Lake. How does that story illustrate these principles?
Mono Lake is a classic, stark example. It's in Eastern California, a very unique place. It's an endorheic basin, basically. Water flows in, but not out, except through evaporation.
So things get concentrated.
Highly concentrated. It's hypersaline, way saltier than the ocean, and very alkaline, too harsh for fish. But paradoxically, perfect for huge populations of brine shrimp and alkali flies. You also get these amazing tufa towers, calcium carbonate structures formed underwater. Mark Twain famously visited and wasn't exactly impressed, but ecologically, it's vital.
Vital how? You said no fish.
Right, but those billions of shrimp and flies are a critical food source for millions of migratory birds, especially shorebirds. It's a crucial stopover point. The whole system hinges on that unique chemistry and those specific invertebrates.
Okay, so a unique, vital ecosystem. Where did things go wrong?
Human ambition, basically. Early 20th century Los Angeles needed water. William Mulholland spearheaded the Los Angeles Aqueduct, diverting water from rivers and streams in the Eastern Sierra, the very sources that fed Mono Lake.
The California Water Wars.
Exactly. They diverted the freshwater inflows. And the consequences for Mono Lake were dramatic and predictable based on what we just discussed about matter and concentration.
The lake level must have dropped.
Plummeted. By the 1970s, its surface area had shrunk massively, nearly 70% reduction from pre-diversion levels. Salinity doubled, threatening the shrimp and flies. Land bridges formed out to nesting islands, allowing predators access. The whole ecosystem was teetering on collapse.
That sounds devastating. What happened then? Did anyone fight back?
Yes. A group led by a biologist named David Gaines started raising awareness in the late 70s. They highlighted the ecological damage, eventually leading to a major lawsuit. National Audubon Society versus Superior Court.
And what was the legal argument? How could they challenge the water diversions?
They used a really interesting ancient legal concept called the public trust doctrine. It basically dates back to Roman law and says that certain natural resources like navigable waters, shorelines, air are held in trust by the state for the benefit of the public.
So the state couldn't just let LA take all the water if it harmed this public resource.
That was the argument, and the California Supreme Court agreed. They ruled the state had a duty to protect public trust resources like Mono Lake, even if it meant reconsidering established water rights. It was a landmark decision.
Wow. So what was the outcome?
The court ordered measures to raise the lake level back towards a sustainable target, forcing Los Angeles to reduce its diversions and seek other water sources like conservation and recycling. It showed that environmental values, the intrinsic value of nature, could hold legal weight.
That story really brings home the interconnectedness, and it also seems like a perfect place to talk about feedback loops.
Absolutely. Mono Lake's decline was amplified by positive feedback loops. Lower water levels increased salinity, harming shrimp, reducing bird food, potentially leading to further ecosystem decline, amplifying the initial change.
Okay, so positive feedback makes things snowball, essentially.
Exactly. Like thawing permafrost, releasing methane, a greenhouse gas, which causes more warming, thawing more permafrost. Or, as the lecture mentioned, drug addiction. Or even cutting down trees, making a forest hotter and drier, stressing the remaining trees. Remember, positive here just means amplifying, not necessarily good.
Got it. So the opposite must be negative feedback.
Right. Negative feedback loops resist change, they stabilize systems.
Yeah.
Think of your thermostat. When the room gets too warm, the AC kicks on to cool it back down.
Or body temperature regulation.
Perfect example. Or predator-prey cycles. More prey allows more predators, which then reduce the prey population, which then limits the predators. Or the lecture example of insulin regulating blood sugar. Most natural systems rely heavily on negative feedback for stability.
Okay, that clarifies feedback loops. Now, let's zoom in on the living parts of these systems. How do we define an ecosystem?
An ecosystem is basically a specific location looked at as a whole system. All the interacting living parts, the biotic factors, and the non-living physical and chemical parts, the abiotic factors.
Biotic is plants, animals, microbes.
Right. And abiotic is things like sunlight, temperature, soil, water, nutrients. And crucially, ecosystems aren't isolated. They influence each other. Boundaries are often fuzzy. Energy and matter flow between them.
And energy flows through trophic levels, right? Producers, consumers.
Exactly. Producers or autotrophs are the base, mostly plants using photosynthesis to capture solar energy. Then you have consumers, or heterotrophs, that get energy by eating others, herbivores eating plants, carnivores eating herbivores, and so on.
And within that, there are closer relationships too, right? Symbiosis.
Yes, symbiotic relationships are close, long-term interactions between different species. We usually talk about three main types. Mutualism is win-win. Both species benefit, like clownfish and anemones.
Okay.
Commensalism is win-neutral. One benefits, the other isn't really affected, like barnacles on a whale. And parasitism is win-lose, the parasite benefits, the host is harmed, like ticks or tapeworms. Parasites usually don't kill their host, though, because they depend on it.
Speaking of harm, Chapter 1 brought up a really disturbing example of environmental change causing direct harm, the Pfiesteria outbreaks.
Ah, yes, Pfiesteria picticida, a truly sobering case from North Carolina rivers back in the 90s. Pfiesteria is this microscopic aquatic organism with a bizarrely complex life cycle, like 24 different stages.
And it caused massive fish kills.
Huge fish kills. But the trigger was identified as excess nutrient pollution, primarily nitrogen and phosphorus from agricultural runoff and sewage. This pollution caused Pfiesteria to bloom and switch into toxic forms that killed millions of fish.
And it affected people too, didn't it?
It did. People working or recreating on those rivers reported strange symptoms: skin sores, memory loss, confusion. It was a stark lesson in how human waste and pollution, altering nutrient cycles, could unleash unexpected ecological and health crises. It really drove home the connection between human activities upstream and ecosystem health downstream.
A powerful direct link. Going back to ecosystem roles, besides predators and prey, what about things like apex predators and keystone species?
Good question. Apex predators are those at the very top of the food web, with no natural predators themselves in that ecosystem. Think lions, wolves, killer whales. They often play a key role in regulating populations below them.
Like keeping herbivore numbers in check.
Exactly. Then you have keystone species. These are species whose impact on the ecosystem is disproportionately large relative to their abundance. Their removal can cause the whole structure to change dramatically, sometimes even collapse.
So, not necessarily an apex predator.
Not necessarily. Sea otters are a classic example. They eat sea urchins, which eat kelp. Remove the otters, urchins explode, devour the kelp forests, and the whole nearshore ecosystem changes. Beavers are another one, ecosystem engineers creating wetlands.
Yeah.
Wolves, as mentioned, affecting deer and vegetation. Identifying them before they're lost is a huge challenge in conservation.
Okay, let's tie this back to the core energy processes: photosynthesis and respiration.
The absolute bedrock of energy flow. Photosynthesis. Plants use sunlight, water, and CO2 to make glucose, sugar for energy, and release oxygen. That's energy capture. Cellular respiration. Organisms, including plants, break down that glucose using oxygen to release the stored energy as ATP for life processes, producing CO2 and water as waste. It's essentially the reverse reaction happening inside the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell.
And CO2 is central to both. We hear so much about CO2 and climate change.
Right, and it's crucial to understand CO2 itself isn't poisonous to us. When we exhale it, it's in soda. And plants need it for photosynthesis. It's fundamental to life. The issue is its role as a greenhouse gas.
Trapping heat.
Exactly. Natural CO2 cycles have always existed, and fluctuations influence past ice ages and warm periods. But burning fossil fuels, which is basically releasing huge amounts of carbon stored by ancient plants millions of years ago, is drastically increasing atmospheric CO2 levels way faster than natural cycles can handle, leading to rapid warming.
Okay, so it's the rate and amount of extra CO2 that's the problem. How does this relate to ecosystem productivity? You mentioned GPP and NPP.
Right. Gross primary productivity, GPP, is the total amount of energy captured by producers via photosynthesis in an area. But plants use some of that energy themselves for respiration. So net primary productivity, NPP, is what's left over. NPP equals GPPR.
So NPP is the energy actually available to the rest of the food web, the ecosystem's profit.
That's a great way to put it. It's the rate at which biomass is produced that consumers can actually eat. And this, interestingly, relates to diet efficiency. Plants respire much less than animals, so more energy is available at the producer level. Eating lower on the food chain is generally more energy efficient.
Makes sense. And which ecosystems have the highest NPP? Rainforests.
Rainforests have very high NPP per unit area, but here's the trick question often posed. The open oceans, because they cover so much of the planet, actually have the largest total NPP overall, even though their NPP per square meter is much lower. Tiny phytoplankton across vast areas add up.
Scale matters. And all this productivity results in biomass, right? Just the total weight of living stuff.
Essentially, yes. The total mass of organisms in a given area or volume. NPP is the rate at which new biomass is produced.
Okay. Finally, to bring our own impact into focus, Chapter 1 introduced the ecological footprint. How does that help us understand our place in these systems?
The ecological footprint is a really powerful concept. It measures how much biologically productive land and water area a population needs to produce all the resources it consumes and absorb its waste using current technology.
So it's like accounting for our demands on nature.
Exactly. It translates our consumption, food, energy, materials, waste assimilation into an equivalent land area. It helps us visualize whether we're living within the Earth's regenerative capacity. The figures in Chapter 1 really illustrate how different lifestyles and countries have vastly different footprints, showing the scale of our collective impact.
Wow. We've covered a huge amount today. From atoms and energy laws to monolace's fight for survival, the complex web of ecosystems, and how we measure our own footprint. Here's where it gets really interesting. All these threads really do weave together, painting this vivid picture of how interconnected everything is.
Absolutely. Understanding these systems, the flow of matter, the transformations of energy, the feedback loops, the species interactions, it's fundamental. It shows how our choices, whether it's water use in LA impacting a distant lake or global CO2 emissions changing the entire climate system, have real consequences. It really raises the question, doesn't it? How do we use this knowledge better?
Definitely. And it leaves us with something to think about. Given how deeply interconnected everything is, as we've seen today, what single, seemingly small change in your daily life do you think could create the most significant positive ripple effect through an environmental system? Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.